I thought it was great in Chapter 3 that you really went through just the whole work environment, how it was set up, PC or Mac. Well, there's ways to work in both environments, and you can use these same tools in both environments, which was great. Because I think traditionally, I was always told Macs were the ones, if you're doing art, you got to do them on a Mac. And I was surprised to see that, hey, no, there's options both ways. And I thought it was great that you went through and you left it very open to people being able to use things. If they're already used to working in one environment, go with that environment because of your comfort level.
Even myself, I work on mainly a Mac now, but I have a PC laptop, and so it's what I work on whenever I'm out of town. And actually, for several years, that laptop was my main working computer. Even if I was here at the house, I would still work on it on the PC laptop. As far as when you're in Photoshop especially, there is no difference as long as you have the same sort of RAM and processor and stuff. If you have a Mac and a PC sitting side by side running the same requirements and running Photoshop, you're all set. They're both the same. So I just whatever will make the transition as easy as possible for somebody. Because actually one of the target audiences that I was picturing while writing this was somebody like Mike Norton, who now he's working more digital, but actually when I first started writing the book, he was wanting to break into that. I remember at a convention talking to him about it. We were at a bar the night before or something, even though I don't drink. I was drinking Pepsi while he was drinking other things. But he was like, and I think he said something like, man, I've really got to try getting into this digital stuff. And since then he has, but I was picturing to myself, he's got deadlines. He doesn't have time to just to kill. He's not just doing this recreationally. So if there's anything that can ease him into it. So I even talk about, if you're a starter at this, one thing you might want to try is, scanning in your rough layouts and then manipulating those in Photoshop. That will get you familiar with the tools while you're in there, and it'll also give you a better end result in your art because your roughs will be more, you will have tweaked them until you're happy with the nuances of it. Somebody who is professional or semi-professional breaking in really does need to be mindful of their time, and so I wanted to be considerate of that.
In Chapter 4, you go through the various palettes that you have set up in Photoshop, and I liked that even though you were assuming in that by the time they hit that chapter, these are people that typically have an intermediate or advanced understanding of how Photoshop works, and one of the things I know about any software program is the way you and I can use the exact same program. We could have been using it for the exact same amount of time, but the way you have your program customized to the way I may have customized it for myself could be very different. In order for us to have a common ground, I need to know, okay, how do you got this set up? What are you doing? And you go through step by step what your palettes look like, what your settings are like for Photoshop, assuming that, hey, we could be doing this very differently in the way that we're looking at it, which I really appreciated, that kind of seeing the different layers and palettes that you use throughout your process.
It gave a good little kind of snapshot of what is Adobe Photoshop. So if you're sitting there and you're not used to using this, if you go through the book, you're not only getting the aspects behind digital comic book creating, you're getting some basic kind of intro to the tools that are being used in it. So it's kind of a nice little just introduction to what is the program. You can see and say, oh yeah, I could do that. Oh yeah, okay, I see that. Yeah, even like an idiot like me, when I was reading this, I was like, this is something I could actually maybe even do. Wow, that's kind of cool.
Great, good. Well, and that is the desired result. And let's face it, when somebody opens up Photoshop for the very first time, now this book is not trying to say step-by-step on how to use all of Photoshop. However, I acknowledge that there might be some people who have had very limited experience with Photoshop, and hopefully they'll be able to get caught up and work through the book. And so I try to angle stuff towards that, at least give good jumping on points if you're, I want it to be an intermediate user, but to get you to that level, I'm willing to help a little bit. So there's a lot of stuff visually when you first install Photoshop. There's a lot of palettes, and quite honestly, in comics, or at least the way that I create comic books digitally, I just don't need all those palettes. So there's a lot of stuff that at least when I customize my workspace, that I've eliminated. And everyone should feel free to do that because you can still get those palettes back. It's not like you're, destroying them. You're just making it so you don't see them anymore. I think it's like this with anything. Even the first time, and this might not be the greatest analogy, but the first time I ever went to the San Diego Comic Convention, I was so overwhelmed by everything that I saw. It's like I was trying to take in too much at once. And once I realized I can only take in so much at a time, I'll just take it in bite-sized chunks. That's when I stopped feeling so panicky. I didn't feel as freaked out anymore. And it's the same thing with any computer program, so Photoshop is no exception to that. Just eliminate what you're not going to use and then just focus on a handful of things at a time.
I think it's one of the things that is unique about art is the fact that in order for you to grow and to create new things and to try new avenues, you got to play around with the programs. I'm instructional tech at my school district, and a lot of times, especially for people who are, like you said, people that are just dabbling into Photoshop and just kind of coming in at that point, you were trying to bring them along as well. When I've got new teachers that are trying to break in and dabble, and I always encourage them, one of the reasons why kids learn so much faster than adults is because they're not afraid to play. And I do think as adults, we know the cost of a lot of times computers and software. So we think that you can't play with it anymore. And that's actually just the opposite of what's true. You need to play.
Well said. I hadn't thought of it like that. That's a very good analogy.
I liked that theme of the book because I felt that all the way through. And I think that's really an important thing because it was accessible because of that.
Great.
We already talked a little bit about Chapter 5, the digital and hybrid workflows. We get into Chapter 6 and we're talking about the master page. What is a master page for people maybe who aren't aware of what it is, or people who are maybe, because I'm figuring that people who are going to pick up this book also are people maybe who are just getting into comic art, as well as people who are professionals who are already in it. What is a master page?
A master page template is kind of a phrase that I coined for the book. I mean, it's basically, to break it down, it is if as an artist, comic book artist, you're going to be doing a series of comic book pages and they all need to be on a standardized template, such as, for me, it was the DC Comic Books template. When I got my first assignment at DC, which was drawing Seven Soldiers, Mr. Miracle, DC sent me a packet of art paper to get started with, and I just scanned in one of those pages, and I recreated all those guide rules in Photoshop so that I could use that recreation as a master page template and basically just base all of my pages off of that document. So what a master page template does is after you've established it once, you can always just copy or duplicate, rather, you can duplicate that same master page template for every page you draw from then on out. So instead of each time creating a new template or a new Photoshop document to put your digitally drawn comic book page in, once you've established the template one time, then always keep that on file in a reference library, and then you're about to start a new project, you just copy that digital or the master page template. Effectively, what I use it for is I'll copy it, 22 times into a folder, and for page 1 through 22 of a comic book, and then I open up the master page template for page 1, and then I start drawing in it for whatever goes on page 1. So there are some artists who, if they're trying this out, if they're trying to make a digital conversion, I think making the master page template is a way to also get familiar with the tools in Photoshop, and I lay it out very step-by-step on how to create the master page template in Photoshop. For somebody who maybe has a good understanding of Photoshop or is under a tight deadline and would actually rather not have to create a master page template from scratch, I also offer, on my website, I have a new section I just created called DigiArt Quick Tools that I'm offering tools that will make working digitally for comic books. It'll make that process easier. Some of these tools are templates, JavaScript, Photoshop, or paths rather, and even later I'll be offering Ruby scripts, which is something to be used in SketchUp, but I don't have anything yet for that. And I have a template. I have a few master page templates on my website, freddieart.com, in the DigiArt Quick Tools section. Creating a master page template is very valuable, but and that's the reason I devoted an entire chapter to it. But if somebody either has already created one, but they want one that's more of the dimensions for specifically for DC Comics or for Marvel Comics or for Dark Horse or Image, I actually have those already pre-made on my site that somebody could download if they were interested. I think at least once, especially for beginner to intermediate users, they should probably build at least one master page template just to have the experience to fully understand it and to get familiarized with the tools.